Hello, welcome to the Pop Off PC Mag's video game show. I'm Jordan Miner. Today we're talking about a new device for playing old games. So, of course, we're talking to Will Greenwald. We're talking to Will Greenwald about the Analogue Pocket. Will, thanks for joining us. And what
Well,
is the Analogue Pocket?
as you can see, if I can keep it, this is a Game Boy. Well, it is not quite a Game Boy. It is sort of the best. It's the best Game Boy in that it's not a Game Boy. This is from Analogue, a company that's made some very good classic game systems because they use FPGA, which is called Field Programmable Gate Array, which means the electronics are programmed themselves to sort of emulate the hardware of a game system rather than using just purely software and the sheer number crunching of a given computer. So in Analog has proven that this is like one of the best ways to play classic games because it basically does more or less perfect performance for whatever it's trying to play based on how it's programmed.
Now, people have been excited about Analog's name in the past, but I feel like the Pocket has gotten even more, almost not quite mainstream. But I feel like I've heard people talk about this device a lot more than anything else they've ever made. Do you have any, I guess, as to why? Like, what about this has sort of kind of like, I don't know, cracked the discourse in this kind of way?
Was it because previously, like Analog is obviously a very niche company. Uh, they focus on classic game collectors and people who have a lot of cartridges. So they focus on systems like that. Their first product, the Analog NT, was basically a $500 NES that had like a machined aluminum body, and it's the best NES there is because of the electronics inside it. But it was also very much you spend a lot of money for the quality here. And then they put out sort of the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis versions of that idea, the Super NT and the Mega SG, $200, which is still pretty high compared to like the NES Classic or the SNES Classic or Sega Genesis Mini.
Yeah.
But again, Analog's FPGA technology in there means they play cartridges and you put them on a TV, like a modern TV, and they look sharp and perform really well, like better than emulation does. So they've pretty much justified the price. Like it helps that they're now 200 rather than 500, and they don't need to be metal. But the thing with the Pocket itself is the first handheld, and obviously handhelds are pretty big. The Switch is huge, and the Game Boy is like it was on top for over a decade. And like depending on whether you think the Game Boy Color is a separate system, this covers Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and it with adapters, you can play Game Gear, Atari Lynx, TurboGrafx 16, Neo Geo Pocket Color. Like this is way more feature filled and system encompassing than any of these single use devices that Analog has put out in the past. That it's just this one system.
Could you explain a little bit more about how you get those other systems? How you can play those other systems that you said you need kind of some like add-ons for, like this whole core system?
Yeah. Well, inside like the core, that's the FPGA. It's just like the processor. So you can see inside here.
Yes.
This slot, Game Boy cartridges go in here. It goes like
It
this.
looks like a Game Boy. It looks, yeah, the whole form factor for sure.
But you can get these adapters. Like this is for the Game Gear. The other ones are coming out next year. You pop this in here. Now you can put in Game Gear cartridges, and they run fantastically.
So is it purely just for the physical connection, or is there anything going on in those adapters, or?
As far as I can tell, this is like purely the physical connection. There is an IC in here, like a little chip, but it might be just like voltage modulation and like, making everything on the same page in terms of connections.
Gotcha. Okay. It reminds me of just like also like the Game Boy Player and the Super Game Boy back in the day, where you could plug those things, like they were just adapters you could plug into your consoles to play games on your Game Boy game, your TV.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I guess where are some of like the sort of the raw numbers about this thing, like the
screen,
specs, I guess.
The screen is 3.5 inches and it is 1600 by 1440, which it might be one of the sharpest screens we've ever actually gotten our eyes on. Like it's up there with like high-end cell phone screens. Like it has less resolution than like a Samsung Galaxy phone, but it's smaller. So it's like 600 plus pixels per inch, which you're kind of going to come into diminishing returns for most content. Like you can only go as sharp as you can, and it doesn't really matter once you're a certain point. But that's for regular content. When you're playing games based on a system that has literally 1/10 the resolution 160 by 144.
Right.
You can do a lot. And the really cool thing, one of many really cool things I found here, and let me see if I can actually show it off. There are filters you can use, and plenty of retro game systems and emulators have like scanline filters. So it's like, oh, you're kind of playing it on a CRT, but because there's so many pixels, this is not going to show.
It's probably not going to show up, but just paint us a word picture.
This is Game Boy Green.
Yeah.
And there's a texture on it because there are so many, like, it can put in so many pixels between the active dots of this 160 pixel wide Game Boy game that it looks like you're staring at that ancient screen, but it's super sharp because it's 10 times as much resolution. So
it's using it to kind of replicate like you said, texture, or like sort of the physical properties of the old screen itself.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing I think is only really popular when you're like dealing with an original system this low resolution, and
right, you have that much like
more
play. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So as with anytime we talk about playing old games on new devices, I think a lot of people will have questions about like the legality of stuff like this. But it sounds like because you are actually playing the old games that you physically own, there should be people can get this without any worry that they have to do anything a little shady to get games on this.
Yeah, and we have actually looked at a couple shady-ish retro game handhelds that use emulation, but Analogue's whole thing is they're basically anti-emulation. They don't enable emulating stuff at all on their devices. The whole FPGA concept is because the circuits are like hardware emulating the hardware of the old system. So it's not the same as a software emulator. So you're not going to load ROMs on these devices, which means you gotta collect cartridges.
Man, it looks like the internet. It just looks like the internet is trying to stop us. Like, you can't see how cool this is.
Well, the internet is against reselling stuff, and you should be able to buy new things when Nintendo finally decides to put them on sale. You still can't get Game Boy games on the Switch.
No, you can't. And they never made a Game Boy Classic either. That seemed like something that might have happened.
That would be so cool. Like as amazing as this is, and like we'll get into that in a second, but there is an interesting thing about this, which makes it a bit different from other analog like the home devices. This is a second FPGA core for developers, and Analogue's launched a developer program so people can program their own cores to emulate other hardware. So down the line, they might release other adapters for just different things, which would be really cool, especially because there's an optional dock. It's another $100, but it kind of turns it into a Game Boy Switch. You plug it into your TV and it comes up on your TV, and you can pair it with a Bluetooth gamepad. I'm
just imagining the massive adapter they would make so you can just plug in a whole NES cartridge into this thing. You're playing this and there's a whole...
It's feasible.
Big block out of the other side. Gotcha. Okay. I mean, do the companies, does like Nintendo and Sega, I guess, also care that do they care about like kind of remaking the hardware on this end? Do they go after those kind of things? Analogue's done this stuff in the past, so you figure they would have a defense.
Right. They haven't yet, and honestly, I think because it is this like hardware level thing, it isn't actually like it's emulating how electronics behave. It's not doing it, I guess, on the same level that an NES emulator would, and even then, Nintendo hasn't really been able to stomp down on those. So this is in a lot surer footing than a lot of other, emulation products you might see out there.
Gotcha. They made it like a clean room. So I was going back to saying, this one seems a lot more popular. People talking about it to the point where like it seems like people have tried to pre-order it and worry that there not be enough stock.
Yeah, pre-orders went up again 2 days ago on the 14th for when we record this. And they basically had like 3 waves of like, you might get this in the first half of 2021 or the second half, or they might ship in 2023 or 2022 or 2023, like depending on, because again, Analogue's a boutique company and there's a certain limit to the scale of production you can do with this kind of device and not go broke.
Well, I'm willing to, like you said, they're a boutique company. I'm a little bit more forgiving of them versus a company like Valve, which probably will not also ship its upcoming Steam Deck handheld until 2023 to most people.
Yeah. there have been like complaints about Analog's sort of communication with some people who've been interested in pre-ordering it, because this has been in the works for over a year. People have been really excited about it, and they don't offer a ton of updates until they're really getting ready to launch. But even then, that's better than the communication you get from Valve.
Right, exactly. How does it feel in your hands? Just like, because
it's fantastic.
Okay, it's kind of like that original Game Boy, or even kind of, it doesn't have the clamshell, but it's like that vertical form factor like the SP also.
Yeah, the SP was the clamshell. The original Game Boy was not clamshell; it was just Fat Boy.
I mean, just as opposed to the the Game Gear, the Game Boy Advance, or the Switch even, that has that more horizontal layout. But it feels good.
Yeah, it feels great. Analog does like, it's plastic, like they haven't done machined aluminum since the original NT, and like the mini NT, like they sort of redid that, and it was still $500, $200, and it's really solid feeling plastic. Like it feels like it's Nintendium, though I wouldn't necessarily drop it like I would an original Game Boy.
So this will be we'll put this in, and we're out of Afghanistan now, but we'll put this in what's the current war we can put this in to compare against the Gulf War Game Boy. We'll find one.
Burning it out by trying to make NFTs on it.
Yeah, that's actually probably it. Okay, so then, but it sounds like for this, it sounds really cool, but it sounds like to get the most out of it, you have to either be in a position where you can acquire a lot of Game Boy games, which the Game Boy is not a system that is current anymore, or just have a lot of Game Boy games, which, it was a very popular system. People have a lot of those games.
Yeah.
But if you're like, those that kind of feel like limits the appeal somewhat to, like you said, like collectors and retro people.
Yeah, I mean, it does very much depend of kind of where you are, because if you're in New York, if you go to thrift shops, that stuff has been picked clean by people who run game shops that know what they're dealing with and can sell them for way more of a markup.
Right.
If you're in the middle of nowhere, you might get some luck. eBay, other marketplaces online, you might be able to find stuff like this. There actually are a lot of reproduction carts out there, and bootleg ones, and actually I have one or two Game Boy Advance reproduction carts. One is the only one that wouldn't work on this because it had this Final Fantasy V, the advanced version of that for the Game Boy Advance has infamously terrible sound. So modders put this sound restoration mod on it and then started manufacturing cartridges and sold it on that. But these repro carts are sort of less consistent for quality control. So yeah, it's a crapshoot there. But original cartridges, like these 30-year-old plastic squares, have been running perfectly on it. And you can find them if you know where to look or if you're willing to pay. There's another issue going back to NFTs. Game collection and the whole, like, I vaulted and graded my game and now it is worth $800,000. We are seeing a bubble almost as bad as when covering terrible NES games became like really big a decade ago with YouTube channels like Angry Video Game.
Oh yeah,
like suddenly like, hey, LJN
2.
X-Men, yeah,
or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
yeah,
Purple Jason Voorhees,
yeah.
Okay,
if you are willing to if you know some places that might carry them, or if you're willing to just branch out, you can find Japanese Game Boy cartridges for generally cheaper than the US cartridges. It depends on which ones. Of course, for really good RPGs like the Mega Man Battle Network series, which I remain a stan of, you're not going to be able to play them unless you know Japanese.
So it's cool. So it sounds like, this will not. We're still asking for Nintendo, these other companies, to release these games on modern systems. Like
constantly, yes.
Like Castlevania Advance Collection. I was playing that recently.
Well, we've gone through the entire 3DS generation. They released like 10 Game Boy Advance games for people who spent $250 when the 3DS first came out.
Me, suckers like me that bought it at full price and got those ambassador games.
And they never released Game Boy Advance games on the 3DS Virtual Console. They did on the Wii U Virtual Console.
Yes.
And they haven't on Switch. This isn't a Nintendo product. It can play Game Boy games, but just reaching back to Nintendo, they make some very weird choices when it comes to what old stuff of theirs you can play.
Right, and it leaves a space for these sort of cottage industries.
Yeah,
but also, again, not just Nintendo. Also, stuff like the Game Gear, and you mentioned like these like really forgotten systems that we're not even like, people aren't even asking for those games to come back.
I've actually been thinking about that. I used to have a Game Gear when I was a kid, and like I had some games, and I vaguely remember playing them, but I don't know anyone who thinks like, oh yeah, I really want to play that Game Gear game like maybe some Master System games because it's basically the same hardware.
Right.
But like,
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's nostalgic for Game Gear, but you might want to play Columns, and this one's perfect for that.
What's your favorite game you played on this to test?
Oof, I have Mega Man Extreme is the Game Boy Color version of Mega Man X, but I also
Okay.
have Mega Man Battle Network 4 Red Sun.
Do you have the Wily Wars? Is that the Game Boy version of those?
That is the regular Mega Man. This is
Okay.
Mega Man Extreme is Mega Man X.
Gotcha.
And it's about Mega Man, the software version of him having to go into a computer and fight the old Robot Masters because of computer viruses.
That's going to be what the Netflix movie is about.
Yeah. There are definitely some white whales out there that I'm looking for, but not looking to spend what they're currently going for. Like, Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Good luck there.
Need to put that out again.
Yeah. There is something I really want to note with just how good the Pocket feels, and talking about emulation. I'm usually really, really forgiving of emulation. I think like if you can play it and have a good experience, if you're not doing something competitively, or if it's not like a really high-end shmup or fighting game, you can have a lot of fun with just solid emulation. And I could really overlook these, deficiencies and quirks emulators could have. And I've appreciated what the Analog Super NT and Mega SG can do, and just like how it does feel kind of better. But until I actually picked this up and played games in my hand and like felt the difference between this and like the Anbernic RG351P, or even just games on Nintendo Switch Online services,
right?
This finally convinced me just like seriously what, with the proper hardware, the original hardware behavior, just it feels,
it's just different,
like a tiny bit tighter.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Things are made for their context. Like they're made to be viewed a certain, like movies and music is made to be listened to and watched certain kinds of ways. And games are art, as you know.
Yep.
They're similar in that way. Cool.
And as it's especially important for a handheld because you have an old NES, you can mod it with HDMI, you can just output it to your TV, you can do stuff with it. Mm-hmm. With a Game Boy or a Game Boy Advance, those screens, they age, like usually don't die, but they do fade. They look like garbage compared to when they were originally launched. Like there are refitting kits. Like I actually refurbished a Game Boy Advance SP, but like if you're playing like the original Game Boy, it's not going to be the same experience as when you got it 30 years ago, just because that LCD is old and it is faded.
I thought of another experiment I would like you to try. You have not already. You remember Game Boy Advance Video?
Yeah, I actually have been trying to find a few cartridges. That's one of the things I have not tested on this. Because, I doubt there would be any DRM issues. Again, this is like pretty perfect hardware level emulation. But
I have a bunch of those. I have some really low res Shrek Game Boy Advance videos. They would not let you play those on a Game Boy player.
Yep.
Figure because you might record it, but
there actually is an option here to force behavior as a Game Boy Advance rather than Game Boy player. Like there are some different tweaks you can do with it that can get the kinks out and sort of have things behave slightly differently, but it's still Game Boy.
Nice. Let's track down that person that made the Game Boy Advance video of Tenet as like a 6-part cartridge series or something.
Yeah, like
that's a great
they probably
story.
Didn't sell it, but if they did like release it on, even if the money just went to Christopher Nolan, I'd be like, I want that cartridge.
That whole set of cartridges.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Any parting thoughts? Any last little thing people should know?
Yeah, I think including Game Boy Advance video, is Shrek the most ported piece of media?
I would maybe guess that's maybe some kind of weird 1910s like short film or something.
But that could be. I'm just thinking of like, is Shrek the movie version of Can Doom run on your microwave?
We'll hopefully we'll get to that. There's still time to get it to that point. I'm still waiting for Shrek 5. That was people, and looking at some traffic numbers on an old website I used to write for. Other people are also very excited for Shrek 5.
I want to read it. It's called The Shrek.
The Shrek. Any case, the Analogue Pocket. How much does it cost?
$200. Good luck ordering it.
Your review is live on PC Mag. You like it a whole lot. So
4.5 stars, editor's choice. Like it is, for what it is nearly perfect.
Sweet. That's a nearly perfect. Sweet. Will, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you next time.
See you.